In 1883, a wealthy Australian lawyer purchased a yacht in the UK, and he had to get that yacht back home. Now, the problem with it wasn't really built for long sea journeys, so he had trouble talking anyone into sailing it for him. Finally, he did. He got a crew of 4 people to agree to it: Dudley, Stevens, Brooks, and a 17-year-old named Parker. And they head out on their journey, and they were doing okay for a while, but about 1,600 miles from the Cape of Good Hope, they ran into a big storm. And they were 700 miles from any land. And they ended up, the yacht sank, and they ended up on a lifeboat. They went for about a week without any food, and then they caught a turtle that they ate, and then they went weeks more without any food, and they were all starving to death. Parker, who didn't have a lot of experience at sea, made a fatal mistake and started drinking seawater. And he got very, very ill. And the other 3 talked about it, and they decided that they needed to eat something, and they were going to die if they didn't. And so they killed Parker, and they ate him. Weeks later, a ship passed, picked the 3 men up. There were the remains of Parker on the raft, and they all confessed to what had happened. So they were put on trial for murder, and they raised the defense of necessity. The idea being, we needed to kill him in order to survive. And they had testimony that all 4 of them would have died had they not eaten Parker. But that was a very difficult concept for a court to accept. The idea that you could kill someone who wasn't posing a threat to you in order to save yourself. And the court rejected that defense and said, necessity cannot be a defense in these sort of situations, and this is murder, and then sentenced them to death. Now, after they were sentenced to death, Queen Victoria commuted their sentence because she believed that it was an extraordinary circumstance, that had anyone else been in that situation, they may have done the same thing, that it was better to save 3 lives than to lose 4. And so she acted as a sort of safety valve where the principle could be upheld that you cannot kill someone in this manner, that the law was upheld, but then they let them out the back door. And that's known as the Royal Prerogative, where the Queen has that power and the King had that power to do that. And we brought that power to the colonies with us and put it in our Constitution. And we granted that power to our president, that he could look at a system, look at something that happened, and had absolute power to release anyone he chooses from federal prison, and can give pardons, can reduce sentences, can grant clemency, and it's an absolute power that the executive has. And it's been used many, many times. Typically, it's used on the last day a president is in office when the media is not paying attention. Turn in their little list. A lot of times it's people politically connected, maybe the law firms, big law firms have been lobbying on their behalf, maybe they're Wall Street people, but they get their list and they all have them. And presidents have used it for other presidents, that power. Some of you old enough to remember these 2 guys, Ford and Nixon. And our current president has been using it a lot lately. And he's been using it to commute sentences that he believes were unfair. Sentences for drug crimes that today would not get anywhere near the sentence that they got in the 70s and the 80s, and has been releasing people for that. And hundreds of people have been released. And he also uses it, once a year to save 1 turkey. So it's from the ridiculous to the sublime. And it's an absolute power that the president has. Now, we also have that power granted to governors of every state, so the highest executive in the states, and that's where it's even more significant, because the United States incarcerates more people than any country in the world. We have the largest prison population in the world, and most of those people are incarcerated in state prisons. And as director of the California Innocence Project, my office, my law students, the lawyers who work for me, we review cases that come in our office every day, more than 1,500 cases a year, of inmates in California who are claiming they are innocent. And California, in the country with the most people in the prison, California is the state with the most people in prison. So we have an overwhelming number of these cases that come in. And we review each one of them, and we look for just one thing: evidence of factual innocence. And to get a case opened in California is an incredible task, to unring that bell, to get a court to say, we're going to take a second look at this case. Even though this person had been tried and convicted and probably lost their appeal, and maybe they've even filed a couple of habeas petitions from prison, we're going to take a look. To get a judge to say that, you need to have really good evidence. And it's a really difficult process. That's why it's a little frustrating when you see governors of states using that power of clemency to, for instance, let their friends out of prison, let the guys out of prison who work in their garden, their butler out of prison, people who are assigned to the state house, because it can just be done like that, with a stroke of a pen. And in my world, and all the innocence organizations that operate around the world, and between all our organizations, by the way, we've released almost 2,000 people, strong cases of innocence using DNA, but we don't have that power that a governor has. And in a lot of our cases, we've run out of options. We've run out of procedures that are left. And so I was thinking about clemency one night, and I thought, we've got all these cases. Why don't we just petitioner Jerry Brown? Why don't we petition him to grant clemency? And my office, we sat down our staff and we identified 12 cases, 12 compelling cases. Black people, white people, Mexican people, men, women, from all cross sections of our communities in California, all with one common thing. They all were strong cases of innocence. And we wrote clemency petitions for them. But then I thought, how are we going to get the governor's attention? Because the 165,000 inmates in California also write these clemency petitions. So I came up with this crazy, stupid idea that I would walk those clemency petitions from my office, a few blocks from here, to the governor's office in Sacramento. And that's what I did. Two lawyers in my office. Thank you. The lawyers I thought would talk me out of it instead said, great idea, boss, you should do that. And two of them even volunteered to go with me, Alyssa Bierkol and Mike Samanchik. And we started walking, and we did rallies, and we went to high schools and colleges and talked, and family members came out of our clients, and people we got out of prison, like Brian Banks, who at that point was playing in the NFL, and he flew back from the Atlanta Falcons training camp to walk with us. And we had people we'd gotten out, their families, their friends, all kinds of people along the way cheering us on and keeping us going. And it's a long walk. I mean, just going through Camp Pendleton is a long walk. So, and at first you think, 15 miles a day it worked out to be about, but it was hot, and people say, well, I can walk 15 miles. Try to do it the next day, and the next day, and the next day for 712 miles. It's a very different thing. We were able to visit some of our clients in prison along the way. Got to visit Guy Miles in San Quentin, who's in prison, even though 10 witnesses said he was in Las Vegas at the time this armed robbery happened in Orange County. And even though we have the 3 guys have come forward who admitted they committed that crime, but he's still in prison. And we ate the same food every day so we didn't get sick, and took lots of pills, and pushed each other along all those miles. We discovered there's no legal way to walk across California up the coast, so we were on train tracks and walking on the 101. That wasn't always well received by some people in law enforcement. And to give you a little flavor of it, here is what mile 450 looked like.
Windy out here, coming across this plain. It's beautiful, but it is windy. Been fighting this wind for about an hour. Getting tired of it. Come on, time for the wind to stop. Stop!
So it wasn't all fun. Thank you. And Big Sur, when you drive it, you don't realize how up and down it goes. It's big. But we finally got there, and we had about 150 people when we got there. It was like Forrest Gump. And we walk into Sacramento, and the governor agreed to have his staff meet with us, a meeting I tried to get for a year, but finally the media tension got us a meeting. And we presented these cases, and we pled to them. These are 12 innocent people. They really need to be released. You really need to look at these cases. And nothing happened. This is 3 years ago that we showed up at his office. And every single morning since then, as soon as I open my eyes, I pick up my cell phone and I tweet, Jerry Brown, please review the California 12 petitions. Please release my clients. But we didn't do nothing and just wait. We kept fighting for their freedom. And we released Bill Richards, who spent 23 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. And we released Kim Long, who came home one day and found her boyfriend beaten to death, and got her out of prison after 8 years in prison for a murder she didn't commit. And we released Alan Jimenez, who spent 24 years in prison for this murder he didn't commit. And we released Mike Hanline, 36 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. And that woman in the picture standing next to him waited 36 years for him to come home. That was his wife who waited all that time. All 4 of these people had compelling cases of innocence that finally the courts recognized. The other 8 are exactly the same. So I ask you to join me in this fight. It is something you can do today. You can follow me on Twitter and follow me on Facebook. And we have 800 and some days left in Jerry Brown's tenure to get this message to him, that if anyone should be granted clemency, why are we not first looking at the innocent people? We know innocent people are in prison. We know it's been documented. Why not look at those cases? And I want to finish by asking each one of you just to close your eyes for a minute and think back in your life to a time when you were accused of something you didn't do, and think about how that feels. Now imagine getting arrested for that. Now imagine going to trial for that. Imagine all your family's resources being expended on that trial. Imagine everyone in your community believing you're guilty of that crime. And now imagine going to prison and waking up every day in that cell knowing that you're innocent and shouldn't be there. It's a surrealistic nightmare that no one should go through. Thank you all for your time.